Welcome to Cartography. That's Rush.
And that's Kip.
And today we are going to be talking about his 993 911 Carrera. We're going to be going for a spin in it, and I'm going to be asking him some questions about why he likes this hunk of shit. So without further ado, shall we?
Let's do this.
What's the year, make, and model of this car?
All right, so this is a 1995. The make is Porsche, and the model is a Carrera, actually. So in this generation, I don't think they actually put 911 on the deck lid.
Really?
Yeah. They only had Carrera 4 Turbo. There was no mention of 911.
Really?
Uh-huh. Even though it's a 911.
That's quite peculiar. So what years did they manufacture this generation for?
So in the US, 95 was the first model year. Rest of the world, 94 was the first year. And then they ran up through model year 98. And there's a lot of variation within the 993 range because of the financial situation that Porsche was in at the time. So in the 90s, Porsche was in dire straits when it came to being viable as a company. So.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that before Volkswagen bought them, I mean, there was questions in the 90s about whether or not they were still going to exist.
Yeah.
In a few years. This is the last 911 that was air-cooled, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Why do people get so erect over the air-cooled 911s? What's so special about them?
They have a really interesting way of driving. They have a interesting sound. But honestly, for me, a lot of why I like the air-cooled car, it comes from the smells and the sounds of it. So, so sitting in an old 911, they smell like old airplanes that were oil-cooled. Yeah,
it definitely has that kind of almost like a two-stroke smell to it, where you smell the hot oil.
And the leather.
And the leather, yes.
Yeah. That combination, I love that smell.
So when you bought this car, what other cars were you considering?
So when I was buying this car, I actually got rid of, I had a 2015 Cayman, and it was CPO'd and it was about to get out of warranty, so I decided I wanted to make a change. I was looking at the 993, and its biggest other competitor was going to be leasing a new Cayman GTS, the one with the 4.0. Hey, look, a 356. Oh my God.
That's our second 356 that we've seen today.
But I will say, the air-cooled cars, you know, the character that these engines have, it is very unique. And it just feels like it's like nothing else that I've driven in that regard.
What is your favorite thing about this particular car?
The steering. So, bar none, this is my favorite car in terms of steering. I love how light the steering is, and it's not artificially light. It's light because there's not much up there. Mm-hmm. You know, air-cooled 911s, they have a little bit of that reputation of being widowmakers and you know, having that pendulum effect, that kind of snap oversteer. Mm-hmm. The 993s, they don't have that nearly in the same regard because it has a different rear setup. So it has a multi-link suspension in the rear. Fun fact, that's why the 993s are wider in the rear. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, so it's not a looks thing, mm-hmm. It's a function thing, and then the looks just happen to come with it. But that's why these narrow body 993s are still pretty wide.
Yeah, it's got dramatic hips, mm-hmm. which I like.
Yeah.
Oh, I like them hips, baby.
Taycan. Or Taycan. It's Taycan.
Taycan? Taycan. These manufacturers need to get like just straightforward naming schemes. Name it Bob.
Name it
B-O-B. I know how to pronounce that shit. The Porsche Dale.
They've been going with that for a while, though.
Taycan. Cayman is also a stretch. I mean, I could pronounce that, but why do you have to do that?
Do you know why it's named the Cayman?
Because alligators. Because they have, I don't know.
They named it after the alligator, but they spelled it wrong. I think the
Cayman's with an I, isn't it?
Yeah, it's with an I, with the alligator.
What's one thing that you hate about this car?
I do wish it revved a little bit higher. It revs to 6,800 RPM. That's the red line in this car. And I wish it had maybe a little bit more power. One thing that this car has, and I would say if you're looking at a 993, I would look for is a suspension upgrade. Because I drove some of these cars that were stock, and having a more modern suspension setup, it does really change the drive significantly. People complain about the shifter throw. I personally actually really like it. I think it suits the car really well, and I don't necessarily feel it needs to be any shorter. I do like the slightly longer setup, and one thing that I thought I would not like is where the shifter is. The actual shift knob is very low. It's actually lined up with my thigh. In all the modern cars, they're all higher up, and my Audi's the same way. It's higher up. I kind of like it down here though. It feels like a sports car and not like a spec sheet, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like a car that's necessarily going for numbers. It feels like everything is more just about the drive, and it's just meant to have driver engagement.
So what was it that made you choose this particular car?
So the reason I went with the 993 is going from the Cayman, I wanted something that was even more analog. I think the Cayman does a pretty good job for a modern car, but there was definitely things that I didn't necessarily love about it. The steering feel, I actually did, after driving an older car and then going into this, I noticed a difference in steering feel. So I wanted something more analog. I wanted specifically a 1995 car because it's before the Ram, and the Ram has a lot of cool things. It does add more low-end power, but one of the things with the Ram cars, they all have OBD2s. This has an OBD1 still, so it doesn't have a check engine light that pops on from the secondary air injection system. 95 is the only year where the coupes had the basket handle, and I actually really like the look of that because it's just kind of quirky. It's a weird thing for a 911 to have, I feel like. And so this car came along, and it had most of the modifications I would want anyways in a car. And so the only thing about this car that wasn't perfect was the color combination. So this particular car is polar silver over, I want to say midnight blue is the name of the color. What I really wanted was an arena red over cashmere. So I think arena red is my favorite 993 color, and it's unique to the 993s. But I didn't want to spend my time looking for the perfect color combination and then not the perfect motor. Like, when you look at these cars, you really want to buy a car that's more mechanically sound than anything else. And so this one came along, and it was the right price, and everything on it was right. The only thing was the color combination. And so I decided to just bite the bullet and get this car, and I'm glad I did, honestly. I will say, after owning this car, I couldn't imagine it having any other color interior other than blue. I actually really like the blue interior. It's unique. There's not that many cars that have modern blue interiors.
I actually quite like the blue interior. It's one of the few things that I like about this. I think there's always going to be inherent value in these kind of analog cars. It's a very modern feeling classic.
The build quality is definitely something that deserves recognition. A lot of older cars, one of the things you may give up is build quality. It might feel a little bit more ratty inside or something like that. The 993, they're built pretty well, actually. There's really not that many rattles or anything like that. It definitely doesn't feel like it's about to fall apart.
Which is incredible considering that these were still hand built at this period, correct?
Yeah, so this is, I think, considered the last hand built 911, where I think, I may be incorrect here, but I think the body panels were still hand formed. I think, potentially. But yeah, that's what they say. They say it's the last hand-built one. And it definitely has, it has a really nice build quality that it feels like it's something that's going to last. Like, having this car, it doesn't feel like it's going to be worn out in 5 years. I mean, it's already lasted 25 years.
Yeah, this car, it feels, it's hand-built, but it feels like it was hand-built by German robots, if that makes any sense. Whereas my Viper is also hand-built, and it feels like it was built by us by hand.
Right.
We don't know what we're doing. I think the thing that's impressive about this is they were hand-building these cars at a time where the company was not making money on these cars. They were losing money on them, but you never feel that they were cutting corners in order to try to be profitable.
One thing that's kind of interesting about the interiors, especially is, you had mentioned that they were not doing well at the time. So Porsche actually, they designed a new interior for the 993, but they couldn't put it into the car because I guess they couldn't afford it. So they left the more minimalist interior from the 964, and in hindsight, I actually think it did the car, I think a little bit better to have this more simple interior.
Yeah, there's a lot of 90s interiors that also didn't age very well. So what are some downsides of owning this car?
The big one, I think, for most of these cars is going to just be, I would say, cost of maintenance, ownership, and repair. And I don't mean that stuff breaks often. Like, this car's been very reliable in the time I've had it. But when stuff does break, it's not cheap in these cars. Like, everything in this car seems to cost much more than you would think. So these cars, they're nice because you're not really giving up too much to use them every day. And you get a lot of what car enthusiasts want in a driving experience. It's very analog. It's very, very communicative.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about, particular models that are the most refined last version of something that will never exist again.
Yes.
So, when it comes to these cars, being the last air-cooled 911, it's also, one of the best air-cooled 911 engines because it has the benefit of all of those years of development. And then, and now, that's basically a moot point because Porsche's not manufacturing them in that style.
Right.
So if you want that kind of extinct technology, you can have it, but you do have to pay a premium for it, and they are more desirable because of that.
It gives you all the sounds and feelings and smells that you'd want in a car. I think it's hard to find that in modern cars. There's still some out there, but you're always making compromises, and you make compromises here as well. But the nice thing is every time I get in it, no matter how long of a drive, it's always a fun, special experience.
So there you have it. The 993 Generation 911 is worth looking at, even if you're not a dentist. That's Rush.
That's Kip.
And we will see you next time.